As I was saying before this break, the next presentation will be from Anabel Sanchez from the Center for Ecological Research and Forestry Applications, CREAF, and she will be presenting the project Be Water, making society an active participant in water adaptation to global change. Thank you, Annabelle, and the floor is yours. You can start when you want.
Okay, thank you. I believe you can hear me now, so I'll see if I can share my presentation also, and we'll have everything we need.
We can see it.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about this project, Be Water project, which was an FP7, so from the 7th framework program of the European Commission, and within the program of Science in Society. This project gathered 13 different partners from Europe and, in fact, one from Tunisia. And it was a very multidisciplinary consortium. It involved research centers, but also participatory experts and policy experts, so very diverse typology of partners. Okay, so it ran from 2013 to 2017, so it's been now 3 years from its end. So we can share also our results and our approach, but also some further developments and outcomes that we've had in these 3 years after the project finished. Okay, so in our case, of course, our project was based on the threats of global change to the whole society. So not only climate change, we also focused on other type of human-induced changes, as for example, land use changes, population changes. So we consider this context of global changes and it really important uncertainty. So we know things are happening, climate change and global change is here with us, but to which degree we will be affected and to which exactly areas or how, this is quite uncertain. And it also depends on how we humans act, actually. But what we know is that there are some areas that will have very intense risk, or they're envisioned to have very intense risk. And we focus in our project in the Mediterranean area. So water resources, water uses, and this water management is quite complex. It involves very different sectors, very different interests, and is quite key and necessary for our human well-being and the well-being of the ecosystems. So it's a very complex issue. So we approach this uncertainty and complexity with an approach of trying to see what would be the best way of adapting to global changes. But we did that trying to establish a dialogue and a collaboration between science and society, because we have this certainty that global changes cannot be met only from science with scientific knowledge, but that they need to be met from the efforts and the knowledges of all society. So we really worked on trying to build societal awareness and empowerment related to these issues, and to build this joint responsibility of everybody to try to meet the challenges we have as societies. It was a bottom-up approach. You will see later on, it was based on the co-creation of solutions from the local societies. Okay, so our case study were as we were just mentioning before, in the Mediterranean area. There were 4 case studies, one in Tunisia, the Rimel River Basin, one in Spain, the Tordera River Basin, one in Slovenia, the Vipava River Basin, and in Cyprus, the Pedieos River Basins. These 4 river basins are all in the Mediterranean area, but they really have quite common and different characteristics regarding the socio-economical contexts and also ecological situations, but also the different activities and land use that are more common in the different areas. So, as I said, they really portrayed quite a broad spectrum of possibilities within the Mediterranean area. Our objectives was to apply to these 4 river basins, quite innovative, we thought at the moment, stakeholder-driven method to trying to push for these local river basins to become less vulnerable and more adapted to river basin in the water management. We also had as an objective that the results we would gather from these case studies could be transferred into management and adaptation policy at regional and national level. Also, for us, it was very important and a key objective to foster and promote this mutual and multi-directional learning from all the people participating among partners and actually with the broader society, because we also try to reach like a more general public in this project. And in the end, what we really wanted was to enhance social participation and build societal resilience regarding water issues at river basin level in these areas. So in order to meet all these objectives, how did we do that? So we, as we were saying before, we established this dialogue and collaboration between science and society with a very intense participatory methodology, okay, in which we engage with local societies quite a number of times. So it was not just a consultation or one specific activity. It was a very back and forth iterative approach between science work, participatory events, and interaction with all the consortium participants, but also with all the local societies. And what we got at the end of this very participatory and iterative process was 4 river basin adaptation plans co-created with local society, so with scientific knowledge, but with also local knowledge. And we also got, you'll see later on also, another important result, which we tried to gather our approach and methodology so it could be useful for other river basins in other places and even for other sectors, so not only for water management. So as I said, it was our approach was based in this back and forth iterative project between research results, but also local knowledge and also co-creation of the specific solutions and in a very different number and typology of interactions with local societies. So for us, something that was at the base of our approach is that participatory approaches really lead to better problem identification and to more sustainable solutions with a higher consensus among the society. So in this sense, we can achieve to attain more sustainable decision and solutions. Our approach was, I don't want to forget to mention, and something that is quite key, and is an adaptive management of natural resources. In our case, was water resources, and this means that we engage all the key stakeholders all along a process from the beginning of the project design to all the different steps of the research development and obtaining of the results, but also in the evaluation of these results to better understand and refine what are the key solutions that need to be reframed in the next cycle of management. So our workshops and different sessions in the 4 case studies involved at least 16 co-creation workshops between all the different case studies, but also, as you can see here, 25 complementary events. It was very participatory, intense, almost 4 years. We had hundreds of participants representing all the key visions, perspectives, sectors and actors of the different river basins. So we had public administration at different levels, from municipal to super-municipal, but also regional, in some cases national. We had academia and scientists, but also the education sector, private sectors, productive sectors in the river basin, so industry, tourism, agriculture, depending on the basins, different sectors represented, of course, differed. But also we had NGOs and also civil society. All these different participants and stakeholders, you can imagine, had very conflicting priorities and competing resources uses. So it was quite a challenging approach. To develop all this activity, we all used very diverse tools and methodologies that allowed us to merge all the different knowledge that we had on the table from all these different participants. As I said before, in Be-Water, we involved local society in problem scoping. So in the definition of what were the challenges for their river basins and what were their objectives. We built this common vision on what participants, what stakeholders envisioned and wanted their river basin to achieve in the future. And one key element in our project was this combination of knowledges. So we have 4 research centers in the consortium, and these research centers brought a whole range of science-based information. So we had projections of climate change for all the river basins. We had climatic risk analysis on droughts and floods. We had land use changes. We have modeling research from hydrological modeling and other kind of land use modeling, etc., etc. We have also information on the future development of population in the river basins, and as I say, a whole lot of scientific information was already available because of the previous work from all these research institutions. But we also had, and at the same level, and this is really important, all the knowledge coming from stakeholder and the local society. So what were the citizen perceptions on current and foreseen challenges related to climate change impacts, what they thought were the drivers of global change in their river basins, the relationships between key factors that they had from their experience, what were the current and planned regional and local policies that could be linked and related to adaptation challenges. And as I said, this common vision that we promoted to be built in our participatory workshops and events from all the people participating, what they wanted for their basin. Okay, and of course something very key, that is specific areas where the stakeholders and the participants knew that were key as high risk areas. Okay, so we combined in the project all this knowledge, and we had also defined what were the key challenges. So all this information was structured in a way that fed into very specific challenges per river basin. In all the river basins, we had water quality and quantity, as cannot be otherwise, but we also had very specific challenges that came from the actual realities of the case studies. So we had some river basins, as the Slovenian one or the one in Cyprus, where flooding was a very key element. So that was a challenge that was structured in there. But for example, for Tordera River Basin is a very forested river basin. So over 75% of the river basin is forest area. So of course, forests were a challenge here. Or in Tunisia, we had some challenges that were very much linked to societal use, because of course the situation of the population is quite different there. So we involved stakeholders into this definition of these challenges, but we also involved them in defining and finding what would be the solutions to the specific challenges. So we co-developed with them, we co-created water management options to meet the challenges that stakeholders had identified. We had for each river basin the different challenges. You see here the example of the Pedieos river basins in Cyprus. So for their challenges, all the different water measures, so water management options that we defined. We also had a lot of efforts put into the dissemination to the broader local societies of our work, of our findings, and of climate-related impacts, the risks and solutions. So we had a lot of design work also, and we had a very wide awareness raising campaign in which, for example, we used all these images to portray challenges and water management options to the broader local societies. As one example, I will show you the case for Tordera, which was the one that we led. So Annalise, which is my colleague here also today, was leading the Tordera River Basin. And this river basin, we had quality and quantity as challenges, we had health and water and forest ecosystem, and we had integrated water management. You will see that these challenges also reflect the sensitivities and typology of people participating. Tordera River Basin is a river basin where people have quite an experience in participatory projects and participation in policy development. And they are very much embedded into the Water Framework Directive concepts. So, of course, the health of the ecosystem was something that was quite key. So these particularities of the challenges, of course, came from the actual people participating. In our case here, the management options that were suggested by people participating also reflect these characteristics of the basin and of the people participating. So you will see lots of green measures and soft measures to give you this idea that the people of the basin already have quite a lot of sensitivity to Water Framework Directive, to ecosystem-based management, and all these kind of concepts. Once we had the whole list of water management options, of these measures, of these solutions that were suggested by the stakeholders, we engage people also in prioritizing and evaluating these options. So we did a participatory impact assessment of options using different scientific methodologies, as socio-cognitive mapping and multi-criteria analysis. I won't go in depth on these methodologies, but in the project webpage that is already alive, you can go in depth. We have some scientific also papers published that explain more in depth these methodologies. And these methodologies, as I said, were carried out with the stakeholders. So we did a participatory impact assessment and a participatory multi-criteria analysis. And the prioritization of measures and the evaluation of these measures was performed by the stakeholders with this methodological approaches that we put on the table. All these results was put together into policy frameworks, because as I was saying to you in the beginning, our aim was to co-create river basin adaptation plans for water management. So we needed this set of prioritized and evaluated measures, water management options, but we also needed to put this into the actual policy framework of each river basin. As we were saying, we were including all the willingness of the stakeholders for pushing forward these adaptation plans. And we included also barriers and opportunities. We tried to analyze the synergies between measures in putting together these adaptation plans. So our results were these 4 river basin adaptation plans, 1 per river basin. You can find it, as I said, in our Bewater webpage, but also in Zenodo. We have uploaded all our results so they can really be available to anyone interested. They're available also in English, but in all the local languages. So Spanish, Catalan, Slovenian, Greek, and Arab. Okay. And another very important result of our project was this handbook of lessons learned. So we really wanted to make available to everybody interested outside of our case studies what was our methodology, our approach, what we thought worked best, what we thought could be improved, and to sum up our experience so it could be used in other river basins, in other sectors, because we think the participatory management of natural resources is quite key to meet the challenges of adaptation in our societies. We also put together quite a few, I think 7 different policy briefs. Some of them were more local level, so recommendation for more local policy actors or national. Other policy briefs were more targeted at a more national or European level. So these are also available. So to sum up some final remarks and some, as I was saying, further developments of our work during these last 3 years, we can share that in our experience, local societies were very much aware of the impacts of global change and worried about them. They could really contribute a lot in defining the main challenges and the possible solutions, and they're very active in participating in decision-taking processes. So we really had this experience of the stakeholders participating, understanding better and being better prepared to contribute in policy developments. We involve stakeholders in evaluating the process, and all the contributions were quite positive. So they had a very good experience, and something that everybody really remarked and highlighted was the actual learning and the established relationships between the people participating, because of this very multi-sector, multi-perspective process. People learned a lot, and the new relations and more understanding was achieved. We really tested innovative governance practices, so how to interact between different sectors, between different administrations, and to enable adaptation strategy and to achieve these river basins adaptation plans. We think stakeholders participating really owned the project results, and we have seen how they have pursued after the project end for some of the measures to be put in place and implemented. So we can see already from these 3 last years that we achieved quite a few impacts in local and national realities. For example, some of the measures we developed were integrated into the different river basin water management planning linked to the Water Framework Directive. So some of the measures were incorporated in river basin plans, the actual ones done by the water authorities. We also had some measures that were taken up in local action plans at municipal level or regional strategies. We had some follow-up projects in almost all the river basins, so live projects, but also nationally funded projects. We had in Tordera River Basin, I think 2 further projects that have follow-up, that have helped into implementing some of the measures that were, were here present at Bewater. We had some of the case studies that really discussed the results at the parliament level. So that was the case for Cyprus. And we have used the methodology and the approach ourselves to apply it to other sectors. For example, we are doing something quite similar for the agricultural sector in Tunisia, still going on. So we're quite happy that actually many of the things and results we got are being used and have some impact at different levels. So I think this is more or less what we wanted to share with you today. And well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Annabelle, for your presentation. So now it's time for questions.
Yes. Hi, Annabelle.
Hello.
We have 3 questions from Lawrence from West Country River Trust. First one is, do you have good presentation from farmers and landowners?
Well, I must say that I invite also Annalise to open her microphone. So, I mean, she can contribute a lot because, of course, I was the responsible for coordinating the project, but she led the Tordera case study, so I'm sure she can say a lot too. We had farmers represented to more or less degree, also depending on the importance of farming in each river basin. So, for example, in Vipava, the Slovenian case study, we had a lot of representations from farmers and landowners. In our case, in Tordera, we also had farmers all along the project process, but not so much. Well, we did have forest owners and forest owners associations, because as I said also, our case study is very much forest land cover. So we did have it. And of course, there were sectors that were very hard to engage. For example, in our case also, Annalise can contribute, but we have a quite important water bottling industry. They were present in all our events. That doesn't mean they were engaged, because they were there to know what we were talking about, but they did not participate too much. So they did not engage as we had seen for other sectors. So of course, there are always sectors that are harder to engage, and we did encounter these difficulties, yes. Annalise, I'm not sure if you want to
I will open
something.
the microphone. You already shared really the key point. And on this, maybe I can add a lesson learned, no? Like the presence, like many times we use indicators to measure the level of participation just by indicating the presence or absence of a sector. And I pick on what Annabelle said, really engaging actors is a long and difficult process that needs specific efforts to be invested. In this case, as she points out, industry and service sectors like bottling industry, but also some logistic platforms which are located in the flooding area, or other big water users who are extracting water from deep wells in the basin. They were really interested, present, but not engaged. And the reason for this is that there are different ways for citizens to interact with administration. So we build up an environment of dialogue and of co-production. But you have to always be aware that there are parallel channels of communication especially between big users or important key sectors with a heavy weight in the local economy. They mostly have their own channels of communicating with administration and influencing decision making. So I think it's key at the societal level to promote projects like ours, because they create a real opportunity to amplify the spectrum of voices into decision making, and also to expose these parallel channels. So I think at the end of the project, we contributed in increasing the visibility of the communication existing, and the need to strengthen these mechanisms, also stressing transparency and accountability in the process.
And to answer to the last question by Lawrence, I mean, this exactly is one of the difficulties of adaptation. Adaptation is not about one sector, it's about everybody together. That's why, of course, in our case, we did not implement the measures. So our results were the plans that included the measures and the approach and methodologies of this handbook of participatory process for water management. But we pursued the implementation of some of the measures in each river basin. And this has been and is being done in different ways. So in some of the case study, there's been specific projects to fund specific measures. So of course, they already integrated the visions from the, not silhouette, but this integrated visions, because that's already within the measures we produced. And some funds have been found for them to be implemented. There are some measures, quite a few in all the river basins, that actually pursue the changing in governance for adaptation to climate change. So for example, in Vipava, we had, and this has been done already, the creation of a river basin council that involves all the different municipalities, but also the regional and national administrations, precisely to tackle and to decide and implement measures to meet climate change related challenges and risks. So one of the things that is really important is to change the governance to be able to implement integrated measures, adaptation measures, and not siloed measures. And this experience is also happening here in our case study. We're also trying to do that. So yeah, that's one of the hard things. Adaptation is touching everything, all sectors, all society, but our policies and our administration and the implementation and planning level is all done, and sectors are all done separately. So this is one of the challenges.
Okay, thank you, Anabel. Thank you, Annelise. Thank you for being with us this morning, and Diego.
Yes, the next presentation will be given by Professor Dave Cooper from the University of Chichester, and he will be presenting the project Channel Payments for Ecosystem Services. Channel Payments for Ecosystem Services. Sorry. This project belongs to the Interreg France Channel England. Thank you.
Good morning, and well done for getting your mouth around that very complicated title. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share my desktop with you, pull up the presentation, and hopefully you can all see that. And hopefully you can hear me too.
Yes, we can hear you and see the screen perfectly, Dave.
Perfect. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present the work that we're currently engaged in. The project started just towards the end of 2017, and if it was to follow its natural course, it would be finishing pretty much at the end of this year. But as with all of you, probably experiencing the COVID has impacted, and we do have some delays, and we're actually looking for a fundamental budget modification, which I'll talk about in a little bit of time. In terms of the project, as you mentioned, it's funded under the Channel Interreg 5 Channel program, and it's looking at overall water quality and the quality of water entering estuarine waters, particularly. This is a picture of Lac de Duc in the middle of Brittany, and it's part of the project. It particularly suffers in the summer from algal blooms and consequent eutrophication. In terms of the overall focus is around the issue of the quality of water entering the channel and associated with the channel region. Between 60 and 70% of water bodies are failing to achieve good status. That's due to a range of issues, but typically around sedimentation and low levels of oxygen. 30 to 50% of the water bodies of France and England don't meet chemical requirements of the Water Framework Directive, due particularly to nitrates and phosphates, but we also have issues of pesticides and herbicides. Now that's partly due to agricultural pollution but other issues as well. The focus of this project is particularly around the agricultural issue. And what we're trying to do is introduce payments for ecosystem services. Now, Lawrence at the very beginning highlighted the issues in terms of poor agricultural practice, and highlighted some potential improvements that could be made. The challenge is that the improvements have a cost, either in terms of reduced yield or cost of implementation themselves. And so what we're trying to do is to implement schemes to overcome the financial balance. And the downstream beneficiaries, the downstream water users, make payments to incentivize farmers to adopt good quality practice, and that's the idea of a payment for ecosystem service. Fundamentally is to improve water quality in the Channel region by implementing sustainable PES schemes. And it's the idea of sustainability that is fairly critical here. There has been work undertaken. The water project, an earlier project, sort of looked at the feasibility of payment for ecosystem services, but that was very small implementation, very pilot-based implementation. What we're trying to do is to emphasize the need for sustainability, so sustainable beyond the project, and sort of an at catchment level, so water basin level. Like every project, there are a number of key work packages, and Lawrence is leading the implementation program as part of West Country Rivers Trust, and that's coordinating 6 different catchment implementations. We're also looking to affect policy, particularly at national but also at EU level, and Sarah Hernandez Consulting is leading on that. So the key deliverables, as I suggested, a replicable and sustainable PES pilot study, a toolbox of resources to support future rollout of PES schemes across Europe, and then a policy report promoting the implementation of PES schemes. So if we look at the implementation work package, this is a single pilot, but consisting of 6 different catchment areas across the Channel region. I won't go through the deliverables, but we'll just have a look at a few of those in a bit more detail. So the case studies themselves cover a range of different geographies and catchment areas. So if we look in the UK, the River Rother in West Sussex, coming off the Downs, is a surface water catchment and has very sort of lots of challenges in terms of sedimentation and the associated runoff. It's a particularly sort of sandy, heathy soil which suffers from that. Whereas the South Downs, just to the south, is a nitrate issue, and that's groundwater catchment through a chalk aquifer. And again, similar issues. In the far west, the Western Rivers area, we've got 2 surface water catchments with particular issues around phosphorus and nitrogen. And then in northern France, in Normandy, we've got a groundwater and a traditional runoff catchment. But again, you can see that it's more of an issue around nitrates and pesticides, whereas in Brittany, nitrogen and phosphorus, particularly phosphorus. I'm not going to go through all of those in detail. I'm just going to pick up on a couple. Lawrence might sort of butt in, and that's just fine, Lawrence, if you wish to. But if we look at the Salcombe and Kingsbridge estuary here, we've got a particular challenge due to phosphates and nitrates. It's a traditional runoff water catchment and suffers from algal blooms, potentially down in the around the estuary itself. And the key issues, there's 4 activities are impacted: boating, tourism, agriculture and sanitation. Each of the areas we've done an initial analysis, the design of the PES implementation, and we're at a phase where we're implementing that at the moment. The key barrier in this particular case study is that there is no single large buyer such as a water company. So in the other areas, they are actually being, in the UK, involve and in Normandy, involve water companies specifically, and that gives you a strong buyer for the PES scheme. In this particular instance, there is no such buyer, and so a partnership's being established between Western Rivers Trust, the Environment Agency, and catchment sensitive farming to deliver a capital investment scheme. So it's a slightly different scheme. It'll be a challenge to make that scheme sustainable in the long term. But one of the aspects of the project that I will just mention a little bit later is the idea of introducing carbon capture into the equation, and that will make payment for ecosystem services, particularly in areas like this, potentially easier to implement and more sustainable. If we look at the Tremblay-Omonville groundwater catchment in Normandy, then that's a very different agricultural and geographical scenario, very, very agricultural, and the groundwater is a significant source of drinking water. This particular area of the project is being led by Roumois Plateau de Norberg Water Union, SCRPN. It covers 100 different municipalities, 33,000 customers, and 3 million cubic meters of water every year. And so the SCRPN is incentivized to cover or to pay farmers to improve their drinking water costs, drinking water quality, because catchment management is around €3 million per year and a lot less costly than the equivalent nitrate removal plant. They've been going for a while, and the focus of their attention is on cover crops. So one of the things that we've identified within the project is the efficiency of winter cover crops in terms of reducing nitrate and phosphate levels and slowing down sedimentation runoff during winter months. Equally, things like hedges, field strips, reducing erosion, no-till farming and organic farming are also being explored within that particular region. And we know from the water monitoring activity going on that they're having a relatively quick impact, much quicker than perhaps we anticipated at the start of the project. What we're finding is that inevitably there are barriers to implementing PES, particularly in France, is the legal basis. So unlike the UK, where water companies are private sector bodies, in France they're public sector bodies, and they cannot historically use public money to pay farmers who are in the private sector. And so as part of the project, Sarah Handers Consulting has done a lot of work to change policy and to negotiate with French and EU authorities to allow that payment to take place, and that's having a significant impact. We've got currently about 50 of the 125 farmers in the area engaged, and we believe that more will be engaged as the project progresses. In order to create that engagement, they ran a number of co-creating exercises with the farmers to identify a PES scheme that would work for them all. And so it's a payment by results scheme, which is which is really interesting. And farmers are paid if they achieve their target, but there's also a bonus for collective action, which again is very positive and encouraging much wider engagement with the programme. So we talked about the legal basis on which water companies can pay farmers. Equally, there are other policy barriers in place that we need to overcome. So, for example, if we want farmers to adopt tree planting, that actually reduces their land value. And there's a policy preventing change back to agriculture. And so there are issues there that need to be addressed. Farmers are often put off by the administrative red tape, access to funding schemes, and too prescriptive. So what we found is that it's really important to engage farmers early on in, and ideally we're engaged through trusted intermediaries who've perhaps had a relationship with those farmers for a long time. In the UK, farm tenancy agreements also get in the way because it's not clear who you should be negotiating with. You can negotiate with the farmer or with the landowner. It can be quite complicated. So what we've been doing is developing what we call this CPES toolbox. And the CPES toolbox is a collection of tools that we've used in the case studies, evaluated them. And the idea is that they cover things like sort of the analysis, providing analysis tools, providing tools forecasting the potential benefits, business case tools and contract tools, plus the various interventions and examples of how you implement interventions. And the idea is that those tools will be made available via the website. They're not there yet, but they're very close to being made available. And those will allow others to implement the PES schemes much more readily and reduce some of the cost associated with implementation, but more importantly, reduce the risk associated with implementation. Oh yeah, oops, there we go. So in addition, we're working on policy, and there's a number of policy statements coming together. We've done we've already done an analysis of existing policy, so we've got a good feel for the policy frameworks available, and those are published. SWOT analysis of existing tools, so you can take a look at that. And then we're organising a series of events UK and France. One of the things that the project has had to deal with, of course, is Brexit, and the impact of that is a divergence in policy. And so we're having to cope with that, but I think we're coping with it quite well. The overall framework is broadly the same, but it needs to be adapted to take account of this divergence. In terms of communication, then lots of communication taking place. I would recommend that you have a good look at our website. It's got some really helpful material on there, and we're adding to that all the time. And once the toolbox is available, that'll should be a significant resource to be shared across the EU, covering a broad range of different catchment areas. While do like us on Twitter and Facebook, and you contribute through that. There's some really good debates taking place around this, and some really good news articles on the website. So to summarize very briefly, we've established PES schemes in a number of areas, and where we've got water companies in place, so for example, Southern Water, Portsmouth Water, and Eau de Paris, they've already given indication that they will sustain these schemes. So the benefits that they're seeing are positive, and that it is something that will continue and is being put into their plans for the next cycle. We have identified a number of barriers to PES schemes, and one of those I've mentioned is the need to establish really good relationships with farmers, and we've done a number of things to those. Those barriers, though, are not insurmountable. There are ways of doing that. I'm going to talk about one in a minute. We've developed the PES Toolbox. That'll be published very soon. And we're starting to work with policymakers. We have a number of organisations. So, for example, in the UK, we've got the Environment Agency and South Downs National Park, who are directly impacted and by policy, but also drive policy. We expect to be able to make changes to policy going forwards, rather like the impact that we've already had in France. I mentioned the project modification request that went in on Friday, so we're right bang up to date. And that's to cope with the COVID delays. They were magnified because of the seasonality of the results associated with changing crop cycles. We are looking to extend the areas to test ideas, including around pesticide and herbicide reduction in Normandy. And then the really exciting one from our perspective is I mentioned the need to or the benefits from things like cover crops and organic farming, no-till farming on soil quality. And what we recognize is that if we improve soil quality, not only does that have an impact on water quality, but it also improves the soil carbon capture, and effective soil becomes an opportunity for carbon sequestration. And so what we'd like to do is explore that in more detail, with the potential of developing a soil carbon code as a basis for a carbon offsetting supplement to the PES schemes. And so farmers can be paid by non-industrial organisations that are not directly users of the downstream water, but are impacted, need to reduce their or implement carbon offsetting. And so that's quite exciting. We're hoping that we get approval to go ahead with that, because it would have an impact, a big impact on the sustainability of PES schemes, but also in terms of overall environmental change. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave, for such an interesting presentation. Now it's time for questions and answers. Jonas, please go ahead with them.
Thank you, Dave. I have one question for you in the chat from West Country Rivers Trust, Lawrence. How much PES funding should go to enacting change compared to measuring change, and what might affect this ratio?
Let me just stop sharing. You know what, I didn't quite follow the question, and I can't see the questions. I can't at the moment see the meeting chat. It's been on. Lawrence, you could probably ask and answer that question, can't you?
Here you go. Just a minute. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting question over how much PES funding should go to enacting change compared to measuring change, and what might affect this ratio. And so, I mean, I don't know whether you want to sort of add in thoughts into that, Dave, or you want me to plow into it.
Well, I'll give you my view, and then we can have a conversation. So, so what Lawrence is asking is that in order to create the change in certain environments, you need to pay for the process. Lawrence mentioned at the very beginning, showed some of the ideas. So, for example, we want to plant a hedge. Should we pay for the planting of the hedge, or should we pay for the outcome as a result of planting the hedge, so the improved quality? And I think it's a very difficult question, because it probably depends on the environment. And so if you look at the estuary area, where there is perhaps it's actually quite difficult to get payment for outcome, it's possibly easier to incentivize farmers by paying for an initiative. Whereas if we look at areas where the water is used by water companies, I think there it's better to pay as they are in Normandy for outcome-related activity.
No, that's pretty much where I was going with that. Is the difference between the output and the outcome, and how much sort of measuring is done by the end beneficiary, and how much interest, because you can end up spending a lot of money monitoring the change and actually not spend that much money enacting the change in the first place. So yeah.
Another question from Jean-François Berthemier. He said that we are very, very interested in your project of sequestration of carbon. Do you think to work also with biochar made from green wastes or other good lefts like roots?
So we could work with those, but from our perspective, that's not really about soil health. That's about working with the produce that you collect. Now we might be able to do something with that, as you suggest, but at the moment the main focus is on the quality of the soil itself and the carbon captured within the soil, rather than the produce coming from the soil.
Okay, thank you, Dave. There are no more questions in the chat, so I think thank you very much for your presentation and for your time. I think it's time to go to the next speaker. Diego, please.
Yes, thank you, Dave. That was very interesting. Our next speaker is Raúl Zornoza from the University of Cartagena. He will be presenting the project Diver Farming from the program Horizon 2020. Hello, Raúl.
Hello, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, I'm sharing the screen. Sorry. Can you see the presentation?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I am Raúl Zornoza from the Technical University of Cartagena, and I'm coordinating the Horizon 2020 diver farming. It's related to crop diversification to increase the yields or land productivity and enhance the delivery of ecosystem services through not only crop diversification but also low input management practices. And one of the ecosystem services that we are studying is carbon sequestration and decreasing in greenhouse gas emissions, not only in farms, but also along the entire value chain. And so, as a first introduction about the project, well, first of all, the project started in 2017. It's ongoing after 3 years, and it's a 5-year project, so it will finish within 2 years in 2022. So we're still working in the project. So I will show some preliminary results of some case studies. Because we have 22 case studies in 8 countries of Europe. So I will show just some small preliminary results in the time and a half. So why including diversification in the farms? Because as you are aware, monocultures are very common in most of Europe, with high intensification in many cases. As you can see here, some images of the Mediterranean basins with olive yards. There are mountains and hills full of olive yards in southern Spain, with bare soil submitted to erosion, and also the citrus, the citrus in the underneath, or cereal like maize on the left. What are the problems that we found with using these intensified monocultures in agriculture? The first of that is the low soil organic matter content of fertility, because soils remain very, maybe not most of the year, but in some cases most of the year when there are orchards and where are field crops or vegetables, and sometimes it's also bare if there are no rotation or cover crops, for example. So organic matter is mineralized, and also the fertility of the soil is reduced, and this is linked to high erosion rates because the soil decreases also the good structure owing to the loss of organic matter, and since it's burying most of the time, we are losing a lot of soil and the most fertile layer of the soil. We are having low above and below ground biodiversity, and this is linked to the need with more fertilizers and pesticides. In fact, when we are using monocrops, we are attracting or selecting the pathogens for those crops. When we use different crops or more rotation or longer rotation with different species, the incidence of diseases is reduced. But we are selecting with monocrops the pests and diseases. And fertility is also reduced. So we have higher incidence of pest diseases with the highest use of pesticides and external fertilizers. Associated to this, we have increased greenhouse gas emission, mostly related to external fertilization, nitrogenous fertilization, and related soil and water pollution by this intensive use in many systems. In the end, we have systems, we are observing that we are having systems with low resilience and adaptability and landscape simplification. So our approach is that agricultural monocultures and intensification can lead to medium long-term sustainability of the current agroecosystem, can hinder the sustainability of the current agroecosystems in Europe. So we should restructure the current agricultural models or adapt them based on, according to our research, on crop diversification and low input management practices. So what I mean with crop diversifications, we can include rotations. So with rotations, I mean that I will have 1 year, one crop. So here, next year, I have another crop. The third year, I have another crop. So different crops in different years. And I can repeat a crop, but at least after 2 years is preferable, what we are doing in diverse farming. We have also multiple cropping. It is like rotations, but within the same year. In the same year, we have two crops. We have a crop in winter, and we have a crop in summer, very common in the Mediterranean basin as well, and other parts of the Atlantic. We have winter and summer crops. We can also work with intercropping, in which we are growing different crops, at least 2 different crops in the same land at the same time, simultaneously. As you can see here in the picture, fava bean with broccoli. And a type of intercropping is the agroforestry system, in which we have the orchard with the trees, and we can grow in the alleys different crops. So we have alley cropping together with the orchard, with the trees, having the agroforestry system, as you can see here in the image, mandarin trees with fava bean as well. So can we report, as I say here, can we report real benefits of crop diversification on carbon sequestration while ensuring high yields? Because we have to maintain at least maintain the crop yield, the productivity, or even when we apply rotations and intercropping, what we aim is to increase the profitability of the farm, increase the farm production, the overall production, while enhancing the delivery of ecosystem services like carbon sequestration. So I'm going to show different results, very few, but some of them of the project by different partners. At the bottom you can see the
Sorry, Raúl, I think there was a problem with the screen sharing, and now it's not your screen is not being shown.
No?
If you can restart
okay, so I have to restart it. Okay.
Yeah.
When did you stop watching?
Just now.
Okay.
Last slide.
Okay, so as I was saying, I will show some results by some partners in the project, and indicate the name underneath at the bottom of the slide. So first, I will show the effect of rotation of arbor crops, mostly cereals, on soil organic matter. For that, we performed a meta-analysis with 3,004 comparisons from literature review. We had included here 38 articles from Europe. And you can see here in this image, here the change in percentage of soil organic carbon. Positive values indicated an increase compared with the control, and decreases with soil organic carbon. And you can see here 0 indicates that there is no change. So with crop rotation, we have in all cases increases in soil organic carbon, while using monocrops, we can have positive or negative. So we have more uncertainty when using monocrops. With crop rotation, we ensure increases soil organic carbon increase. When we say crop rotation, we also check about what type of crop rotation. And we observe that here we had the highest soil organic carbon increase. In fact, the one that was really significant was when we had at least 3 years. It means that we repeat the same crop every 3 years at least. And when we use a legume. So we need to include a legume and not repeat the crop in at least 3 years to have real increases in soil organic carbon, as you see here. And well, we know that legumes are always encouraged to be used in agriculture as cover crops or intercropping or soil rotations because of the nitrogen fixation, but also because they stimulate microbial communities and can also increase soil fertility, as I will show later. I show also the effect of alley cropping in this case. This is another experiment. This is also a meta-analysis, but we're working with alley cropping in Mediterranean orchards, focused on soil organic matter. This is a meta-analysis with 187 comparisons from 46 articles. And here I show again the change in soil organic carbon, comparing intercropping, annual crops or perennial crops. So the alley cropping within the trees, or annual or perennial, compared to the monocrop. And in all cases it was positive, comparing to bare soil for sure. So it increases mostly for perennial crops. You have an example here with barley and vetch in mandarin trees of annual crops or perennial crops below, with thyme within the almond trees. Alley cropping can also enhance ecosystem services in almond orchards. I show here an example of Spain. This was a work performed by the group of Sebas Sesig, the Soil and Water Conservation Group. In fact, I have seen Joris Devente here around, and they have been measuring also erosion and the carbon that has been lost by erosion. And in here, for example, in this experiment, long-term experiment for more than 15 years, they compared the almond monoculture with almond diversified with oats and vetch. And they observed also, this is the control and this is the diversified system, they observe increasing our organic carbon, so carbon sequestration in the soil when we are using crop diversification. So we see that when we maintain the soil with vegetation, we are increasing the carbon sequestration. And also here the same with total nitrogen. This is another example of almonds. We have the almond monocrop diversified with thyme and diversified with caper in the Murcia region. And we have been measuring greenhouse gas emissions to see if the crop diversification could decrease the emissions for the soil, not also measuring soil organic carbon, but also the emissions. And you can see here the pattern for 1 year. We are measuring for 2 years. This is the measure from 1 year. With the emissions here, the date, and in black the monocrop, in red the thyme, and in blue the caper. And well, you see the typical tick related to the seasonality, but you see that in this occasion there is a peak in the black line related to the monocrop. So the emissions were higher in this time in the control related to diversified system, and this was related to tillage, because the tillage was reduced in the diversified system and only limited to 2 meters from the trunk of the tree. So it was related to tillage. In fact, when we show the cumulative estimation of the cumulative CO2, we have seen that after 300 days, almost a year, but not yet, we have reduced the emissions in diversified systems compared to the monocrop of 150 grams of CO2 per square meter. In addition, we are attracting pollinators with the thyme. As you can see here, these images. So we expect to have an effect on almond production, because we have selected this type of thyme, Thymus gemmalis, because the blossom coincides with the blossom of the almond in January, February. But we haven't seen an effect yet. As I indicated before, the people from the conservation of water and soil in CSIC are also working on the effects of erosion and how the carbon is mobilized by erosion, and working in the mandarin monoculture and diversified system with vegetables and fodder. They observe that you see in blue the monoculture, and in green the diversified system, the carbon mobilized by erosion. So you can see here how the carbon that was lost by erosion was higher in the mandarin monoculture, owing that it is bare most of the year. So we have observed 20% of reduction of carbon lost with alley cropping owing to erosion. So I will show that intercropping system in vegetables can also enhance yields and carbon sequestration. I will show a comparison of melon monoculture. I show these green bullets indicating the melon plants. And we established 3 different intercropping patterns with cowpea, Vigna unguiculata. It's a legume. We established a row intercropping, one line of 1 row of melon and 1 row of cowpea without changing the melon pattern. A row intercropping 2-1, indicating 2 rows of melon, 1 row of cowpea without changing the melon pattern, as I said, or what I call mixed intercropping. We included 1 seed of cowpea within 2 plants of melon in all the rows. And also we reduced 30% the fertirrigation, because the system is fertirrigated. The fertilizers are included in the system by the irrigation water. And we reduced 30% in the diversified systems to see the effect of cowpea with fixing nitrogen and mobilizing nutrients by activation and microbial communities. So you have some images here of the melon monoculture, row intercropping 2-1 at the top, or mixed intercropping below with the flowers of the cowpea and the leaves of the melon. So we observe, as you see here, I show 2 years, 2018, 2019, in 2 colors, in blue, the last year, and this is the melon yield, monocrop, and the diversified systems, and we had highest production in the diversified systems. That was related to the highest number of melons that we had, but also the highest in the weight of the melons. We associate this to the presence of the cowpea, that it's attracting pollinators, the flowers. So we observe more insects that can also pollinate the melon, and also by the nodules of the cowpea. Related to the soil quality, I show here the soil organic carbon. I show here the value of the melon monocrop first, and cowpea monocrop and diversifications. This is after 2 years. This is the last year that we measured. And you can see here with the cowpea monocrop, we increased the carbon content, it is also observed in diversified systems. So the cowpeas is contributing to increase carbon, and we reduce the external fertilization. The same with nitrogen, but also interesting with other nutrients, because if we are increasing the mobility of other nutrients, we reduce the use of fertilizers. And we increase the mobility of phosphorus in diversified system, but not by only in the cowpea, when we are growing solo cowpea, only when they are growing together. So there is some interaction between the two species that are activating other microbial communities. So, also moisture, we increase the moisture of the soil with the intercropping. Very something essential in the region. This I didn't say, but this is also in the southeast Spain, semi-arid region. And related to this, we made a study about bacterial and fungal diversity, just to check if the microbial community had changed. It was related to changes in soil organic carbon and nutrients. Okay, we have here the diversity, that it was lower, but not significant, but slightly lower in the melon monocrot. This is the bacterial diversity Shannon indices. But here the important, this is the relative abundance of bacterial genera, first cowpea, melon, and different diversification. And the important here that we observe in diversified system increases in the proportion, the abundance of Pseudomonas or Sphingomonas that are related. It is known that these genera are related to increasing the solubilization of phosphorus, calcium, iron, so it could be related to increases, for example, in the biolevel phosphorus, but they work on that. So we are activating this type of bacteria by using just intercropping and reducing fertilizer, and we didn't change the pattern of the melons. So the take-home messages, sorry if I've been very fast, I wanted to show you some results just to know what we are doing and the most important results. So adoption of crop diversification can increase carbon sequestration in soil by new organic compounds entering the soil system and activation of microbial communities. The use of legumes in crop diversification is highly encouraged. Crop diversification can decrease the direct greenhouse gas emission from soil, but also indirect by decreasing the use of fertilizers and pesticides. And crop diversification has to be properly tailored. This is true. Not all species at all patterns work everywhere. We've been seeing that in the project. So it has to be tailored for each area from a technical, cultural, and environmental perspective, so that it can enhance the delivery of ecosystems. So you can follow our results and our progress on our website, Dabber Farming, and on our social media. And also we belong to the crop diversification cluster in Europe with other projects. So you can also check our progresses in the cluster in the social media. So thank you very much. 20 minutes, just what I was about to last.
Perfect timing, Raúl. Thank you very much. Now, I think there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes.
Jonas, if you could transfer them to Raúl, that would be great. Thank you.
We have several questions from Diego Intriguiolo from FESIC. Gracias, Raúl. Very interesting. I actually fully support the approach you followed. Just some comments for discussion. Are farmers willing to include intercropping or agroforestry system? How difficult is to manage the farms when you have different crops? How to deal with machine labor and so on?
Okay. We have farmers that are willing to do it. In fact, they are doing that. I have been contacted by some farms or farmers, and they started, for example, 3 farms have started this last summer, including cowpea in the melon grow, in the melon cultivation. In fact, I want to see the results, but I need to meet with them, but they are interested. Not all of them. In fact, some others don't really agree that it's a good technology, or it's something that is gonna take time to learn, or they are having good production. It's something that they don't care about, the delivery of other ecosystem services, or even reducing fertilizers. But some have been interested and have been implementing that. Difficulties, yes, there are some. And first of all, to select the proper association, because we have to check about pollinator, auxiliary fauna for the beneficial insects, but also the pesticides that are used in one crop can be permitted in the other one. That's where I said that it has to be tailored and be thought of that with the farmers, thinking of incompatibilities, and with machinery. For example, in the vegetables, it's everything done manually, so there's no problem for them. In Campo de Cartagena, for example, here, everything with this vegetable, they do it manually, so they are doing manually, so no problem for it's not something that it's bothering them for harvest or something. With agroforestry, and there is a need to adopt new machinery. It is true. And in fact, in the project, there is a manufacturer of machinery working on that to have new implements to adapt the machinery for alley cropping for sure.
Okay, one last question from Diego. What about water use when you have intercropping or cover crops in the orchards? Is water use increased? Is this feasible in semi-arid areas?
Oh, sorry. Okay. For example, with the almonds that it's rain-fed, so we didn't apply any water. We use for this species adapted to the conditions of the area, and in fact, we selected the species that were growing around the native species, the thyme that was native in the area. We can find it around, and also the caper that grows nature in the area. Looking to decrease the competition for water. So far, we haven't seen, after 3 years, we haven't seen effect on almond production or almond growth or health, because also the caper has long roots and the almond is more superficial and thyme are smaller. So we are working with that, but so far we haven't seen any effect. That was the idea. We don't know long term. With the irrigation orchard, we have included, yes, some, for example, fava, fava bean or other like porcelain and other vegetables, that we needed to irrigate them in some occasions because otherwise it didn't grow. What we are doing is to implementing deficit irrigation in the orchards, in which we are having alley cropping, so that the water that is saved from farming to irrigate the trees, in this case the citrics, that water is used for this periodical irrigation episode that we have to perform on the alleys.
Okay. Thank you for your answers, Raul.
Thank you for the invitation and
Great. I see there is another question from Jean-François, but I think that maybe, Raul, if it's possible for you, you can answer it in the chat and we can move to the next.
I will read it and answer in the chat.
Yes, we are in a tight schedule, so that would be great.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, thank you. The next intervention will be from José Darroces from the Laboratory Geoscience Environmental Toulouse, from the National Center for Scientific Research of France, and he will be presenting the project Soil Take Care from the program Interreg Sudoe. Thank you.
I will try to do that. You understand me because I'm not very familiar with Team, so I'm not sure you can see my presentation.
Not yet. You have to go to the space top right of the screen. You click there and then you select the screen you want to share.
Okay, I try to do that. The screen I want, this one. It's okay?
Yes, there we go. Perfect.
Okay. So let me begin by introducing myself. I'm José Darroze from the University of Toulouse, and I was the principal investigator of the Soil Take Care project. This project was funded by the Interreg Sudway program, and this project brought together Portuguese partners like the EST laboratory from Lisbon, Spanish partners like the University of Cartagena and Oviedo, and also the CTM Foundation, and many French partners like IRSTEA from Montpellier, INP from Bordeaux, and the University of Limoges, and my laboratory, of course. The project originated from some observation regarding EU environmental guidelines. The first main European step took place in 2000 with the implementation of the Water Framework Directive, and was followed a few years after by a similar directive for the air. The last compartment of the environmental system, the soil, don't have at this moment a directive similar to the soil directive or the water directive or the air directive. And this is due to many problems. We can synthesize in 3 points. The first point is you have many soils in European countries which show industrial and or agricultural contamination. For industrial site, I think you have more than 30,000 site in Europe, so it's a very large amount of contaminated site. And the problem of this industrial site, many of them are orphan sites. That is to say, industrial polluter are disappear, and it's now the European state which have to control the contamination and make the remediation. And this is a big problem because the cost of the contamination and the rehabilitation of the soil is very exorbitant for village and city. Of course, local authorities cannot manage this cost, but also for region and even for countries. So it's a little bit complicated, and he explained what at this moment we don't have a directive for the soil. And the project SoilTaker want to answer to this problematic. So we choose to develop low-cost tools to monitor and for the remediation. We decide also to study at the same time all the compartments. Many studies look only one compartment, air, water, or soil. In that project, we want to study all the compartments at the same time and to see the interaction between this compartment. And we also introduce the vegetation as a variable in this context. And to convince the political and the financial authorities, we choose to show the impact of the contamination on human health using simple, not very simple, but some simple criteria clear to understand. And we finish by socio-economic analysis of the contaminated area to see the evolution of the mentality when you don't have a remediation and after remediation. First, we have developed low-cost tools for mapping and monitoring and the remediation. And this low-cost tools are represented here. For example, we use passive sensors like Owen gauge, and we choose to develop homemade sensors and in homemade gauge, and in that case we reduce drastically the cost. We also choose to use the biosensor to monitor the air contamination. This biosensor is the Tillandsia usnoides. It's interesting because this plant have no roots and use the air nutriment for the growing of the plant. And we construct also some more evaluate captor active sensor which permit to differentiate a particle of 2.5 micrometer and 10 micrometer. And we have now a new evolution of this sensor, which introduce also nanoparticles. So we have evolved this sensor. We also, for the soil, developed some new sensor, and for example, we used the GNSS signal to monitor the contamination of the soil. Or what is the GNSS sensor? In fact, it's more well known as GPS technique, and we don't use it for positioning. We use it looking the reflected path which have interaction with the ground and with the metals and metalloids which are present in the contaminated area. Here it's the area of Cartagena in Spain, which is the mining area. And we use also the XRF captor to identify the chemical, the metalloid present and the heavy metal present, which are in the soil. Using all of this, we develop classically a study of various sites in the area of Cartagena. Some area are mining waste, some area are urban area, agricultural plot, to have an idea of the evolution of the contamination in the whole region. We obtain measurement for each element, for example, the zinc, the lead, the arsenic, and the cadmium. And we can see that for all the sites, the color give the position of the sites. The waste are in red, the agricultural plots are in blue, and the urban area are the other color. And you can see that in all the case, you have a concentration in heavy metal and metalloid, which are upper than the traditional threshold value. Depending on the parameter we are looking, it could be national threshold level or European level. And it's the line, or the red line in the plot. We also monitoring agricultural crop with the help of the University of Cartagena. And in that case, we can observe some fruits, some vegetable. For example, here it's lettuce, the leaves of the lettuce, and you can see that some lettuce, like the Loso Rosso, have a very low content in heavy metal and metalloid. And with discussion with national authorities, local authorities, not national authorities, the local authorities decide to promote the Loso Rosso more than Batavia or Romana due to this content of heavy metal element, which is very reduced. We also used vegetation for remediation. You can see here before in the image before the waste deposit. You can see you have no vegetation in this area. Is due to the acidic soils. If we want to make bioremediation, is necessary to modify the pH. So we have the University of Cartagena have had some carbonated waste to reduce the pH, and they had also nutriment using pig manure. And after that, they put the vegetation. And they use for that natural spaces of the region. The interest of these spaces is they are adapted to the climate, which is in this case semi-arid condition. And also these spaces are not very expensive. So the remediation finally have a cost very reduced. And we are looking the evolution of this vegetation during time, and we can see that you have some plants which naturally ingest heavy metal, depending of the spaces, and also if you look the root, the leaves of the stems of the plant, and you can see you have 4 species each time have a high concentration of heavy metal. The interest of this is you reduce the amount of metals in the soil. So it's it seems interesting to use bioremediation, but we have also looked to electric tomography of the soil to have an idea of the repartition of heavy metal with the depth, and we can observe that in the zone of remediation, in this part, you have a strong concentration of metals, that is to say you have a high conductivity or a low resistivity, and low resistivity are in blue. You have a concentration of this heavy metal at the border between the waste and the bedrock, and this in this area you have the groundwater, and so you reduce the amount of heavy metal in the soil, but you increase the quantity of heavy metal in the water. So it's not completely positive. Another interesting point, as you can see here, this vegetation have another interest. It stabilizes the metalloids and the metal when you have wind, which is the main factor which transports heavy metal, and it's the main idea of this remediation is stabilize the soil to avoid that heavy metal go away. Now we change of site. We go in France, in Viviers, and we have conducted similar study, but in that case is the main compartment affected is not the air, is not the water, is the soil, and this soil present also in that case high concentration in heavy metal. For example, the lead and the zinc have high concentration, and we evaluate the health risk associated to this concentration of heavy metal. We done that also, of course, in the Cartagena area, but also in the Viviers area, and we calculate two main factors, the hazard index and the total cancer risk. These factors depend of parameters like the concentration of contaminated in the medium, the ingestion rate, the exposure frequency, but these parameters are easier to simulate, and you can obtain these indicators of the risk for the health. To understand this factor, the hazard index upper value, which are upper than 1, present a risk for the health, not cancerous risk, but a real risk. And for the total cancer risk, if you have value upper than 10 minus 4, you have a risk which is unacceptable. And we have conducted this study in the area of Viviers with the University of Limoges, and you can see we have separated two kinds of population, the adults and the children, and you can observe that for the children, the concentration in lead and arsenic are in all the cases upper than the limit, the threshold value of 1. That is to say, you have a real danger for this population. And this is true if you look the total content in metals, but also see if you look only the bioaccessible fraction of this metal, it reduces a little bit the level of contamination, but you have a clear risk with lead and arsenic in this area. We use the hazard index, and this is interesting because it combines all the effect of the metalloid and metals, heavy metals, and you can have an idea of the cocktail effect. It's not a real quantification of the cocktail effect, it's just in an evaluation. We have also, in fact, the ISTEA and Chrysel Gramaglia conduct also socio-economical studies, and they have done one in 2009 at the beginning of epidemiological investigation, and they do the same study 10 decades later during the Salty Care project. And she observed that one, the conditions of life are not the same, and many factors have reduced. For example, the cost of the habitation decreased strongly. Social activity in the city decrease also. You have many factors which now conduct the citizen to be more critical with the soil contamination and the industrialists, that is to say the society Vieille Montagne, which at the beginning of the study pay for many things, for example, their food, the football club, the theater, the school, and all of these funds disappear in the present day, and now the citizens want some explanation and want to know the level of contamination. So you can see that the mentality change, and the main factor is the money. And clearly, now the Salty Care project was invited at the meeting with the French Ministry and the local authority for the Viviers case. And we have estimated the remediation for this site between 3 million if you choose worse quality remediation to 30 million. And this cost of remediation doesn't include low-cost solution provided by the project. The ministry wants rapid remediation, so if they choose a drastic solution, which explains the cost, which is very, very high of the remediation. And just to finish, we continue this project has finished in last year's, and we continue to promote the result of the project with flyers for the French deputies. And in the next few months, we have to prepare a talk for the European Commission also. Thank you for your attention. I hope I was not so long.
No, it was perfect, Jose. Thank you.
Okay.
Jose,
Great.
Jean-François Berthumier has a question for you. And he wants to know that if you use biochar for the bioremediation.
Okay. I don't. The sound is a little bit weak, and I don't understand what you say.
Let me repeat, please.
Okay.
Jean-François Berthumier from l'Association climatologique de la Moyenne-Garonne et du Sud-Est wants to know if you use biochars for bioremediation. No,
we don't use that in this project. We want to use it in other project which is the continuity of this project in an area, a mining area in Salsigne near Toulouse. But in that project, we don't use this kind.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Jose.
So thank you again, Jose. And we have concluded with the presentations. I hope you found this workshop interesting. And now I just would like to give the floor to Natalie Colo, who will give some closure words of this session. Thank you very much to all the participants. Bye.
Yes, thank you, Diego. Hello again, everyone. In behalf of the Dordogne Chamber of Agriculture, organizer of the event with the support of DEX, I would like to pronounce some brief closure words. First of all, I would like to thank all the speakers of this session, whose collaboration is very much appreciated. I hope that their interesting presentation have helped disseminating results and good practices that can serve as model for other countries. In addition, I also hope that this action within the CCC project has been useful for the project presented this morning with regard to the visibility of their results. Thanks also to the audience for being here with us this morning and for your questions. Finally, as in CCC, we will continue working with other projects. I invite you to check the CCC webpage and, in general, to remain in contact in order to benefit from future networking opportunities or collaborations. Thank you very much. Merci.
Okay, thanks to everyone. I just wanted to add a last comment that, as I previously said, all the materials will be made available to you at our website, and that was all. Thank you very much, and see you in the next research mission. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay.